Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to another discussion video today on something that I think is a bit of a hot topic. I'm going to be interested to see how this one goes down because I think I have some potentially unpopular opinions with this one. That said, if you do enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe, especially if you like these sorts of videos where I pick apart an issue within the hobby. Also, this video has very kindly been sponsored by Readly. I'm going to be talking more about them later on, but yeah, great to have their support once again. So, as you've probably seen from the title, today's video is all about duplication within the hobby, and what I mean by this is when two different manufacturers release their own individual models based on the same prototype. Like I said, this has been a very hot topic recently, and it seems to be coming up more and more often nowadays. So I wanted to talk about what the implications are with this, why it happens, and also look at the reactions from the hobby itself. I have quite a strong opinion myself on this particular topic, and I will cover that too. But yeah, let's dive in. So I'm going to start off by talking about Hornby because lots of people call them out as the worst manufacturer for duplicating models that other manufacturers are also working on. And I'm sure part of this is just because some people like to take any opportunity to bash Hornby. I don't understand why you'd want to bring that negativity into your hobby myself personally, but as I've said in previous videos, Hornby bashing is very much a popular sport these days, considering that they are a very big, easy target. And I think a lot of the discussion or outrage around duplicating models really came to the forefront when both Hornby and Rails of Sheffield decided to make a 00 gauge Terrier. We got to see a lot of the behind the scenes of this with the James May TV programme that was on around the same time, and that kind of covered the development of the two models. And I think a lot of people took this as Hornby deliberately going after Rails of Sheffield, perhaps even maliciously. I think in the programme, Hornby said something like it's our model, and I'm probably paraphrasing there, it's been a while since I watched the programme. But to play devil's advocate just for a moment, I can kind of see where Hornby are coming from in this regard. The Terrier has been in their range for a long time. It was one of their most consistent models. It's a bit like the Flying Scotsman or an A4. Hornby have done those forever as well. It's a staple of their range, and I can see why they wouldn't want to lose a model like that. The flip side, of course, is that Rails of Sheffield are more than welcome to make their own version too. Hornby don't have a hold over that specific model. But I can't help but wonder how much of this battle was actually hyped up for TV. You know, TV over-dramatizes things to make it more interesting, and you see this now on YouTube as well. And there's also a lot that you can do with editing as well. For all we know, there might well have been some discussions off-screen or things that didn't make the final cut because it didn't show the narrative the way that the TV programme was trying to tell it. It's that classic thing of just don't believe everything you see on TV. There is also the fact that Hornby's Terrier came through very quickly. Now, I know Rails announced theirs fairly early on, but still, we know how long models take to produce. I don't think Hornby could really have rushed something through that quickly and still managed to have released it well before their competitors. This was also at a time where Hornby was pretty on top of their release schedule. I think they announced the B2 Packet and the Ruston 48DS at the same time, and both of those were available fairly quickly too. There is also the thing that the Terrier was originally an Oxford Rail model. Hornby obviously had ties with them at the time, and so apparently they took the model on themselves for their main range, which to me just kind of shows that there was lots of demand for an update of the Terrier. Even if you take Hornby out of the equation completely, both Rails and Oxford had independently decided that a Terrier was worth making. But had Oxford Rail released the Terrier instead of Hornby, would they have got so much hate? And somehow I don't think so. But putting Terriergate aside, as much as people like to go after Hornby, I don't actually think they're the worst manufacturer for duplicating models. They do always seem to get pulled up for it though, and anytime a manufacturer teases a new loco announcement, there's always some genius in the comments going, "Ooh, I bet it's a Terrier." Because that just never gets old or tedious, apparently. I mean, it's only been, what, like 6 years now? But no, actually, I think there are other manufacturers who do seem to have a bit of an issue with duplication. Accurascale and Bachmann seem to be working from the same checklist when it comes to large diesels, for example. There's also the Class 60 from Cavalex and Accurascale again. Bachmann and SLW have done the Class 24 and 25s each. Even Rapido and Ellis Clark with the LMS Lomac. I think it's the Lomac. But yeah, and this is far from an exhausted list. I'm sure there are other examples out there that I've forgotten to mention that someone will probably put down in the comments. And generally, in all of these instances, there doesn't seem to be the same outrage about duplication. Frustration, absolutely, but it's interesting to see how the reactions differ from when Hornby do something like this. And to be fair, from Hornby, they did try to get themselves away from the whole duplication issue by introducing TT120, and look how a lot of people reacted to that. I've said in the past, but it does seem like whatever step Hornby take, it's going to be the wrong one in some people's eyes. So I think my point with this is generally that we should all kind of just take a step back and think about the bigger picture. Even if there's a particular manufacturer that you don't like for whatever reason, appreciate that this is not an issue that is limited to a certain company or particular figures within those companies. Getting tribal doesn't help solve the issue. In fact, it only complicates things. And so we do kind of need to remove our emotions from this topic a bit. So what is the issue people have with duplication? Why is it such a bad thing? Well, the main argument tends to be that it's a pretty small hobby. We're not talking about mass market consumer electronics here. It's a niche, passionate community, even more so when you break it down into different scales, steam, diesel, electric, even time periods and locations. Not every model is going to interest everyone within the hobby, which restricts it even further. So when two manufacturers do end up making the same model, it can feel like a waste. All that development time, all the money and the tooling, and then it turns out that two manufacturers have been working on the same thing. You can see how it's frustrating. The thinking goes that if those manufacturers had worked on different prototypes instead, we'd have some more variety, more gaps filled, and ultimately a better spread of products for us as modelers. And yeah, on paper that does make sense, but in reality, I think it's a bit of an oversimplification. We've got to remember that these companies are businesses, not wish fulfillment machines. They don't pick projects based on what's never been done before or what would complete a perfect historical lineup on someone's layout. That's not to say that they don't consider those things at all, but ultimately they pick what they think will sell. And they have to, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep them afloat. The issue is that all the manufacturers are working from that same logic. They're spotting the same gaps and know which prototypes will go down well with us modelers. And here's the kicker, they're not allowed to talk to each other about it because that would be collusion, which is illegal. So when two or three manufacturers end up going after the same model, it's not some conspiracy or even a petty rivalry. It's not even just a coincidence. It's that two manufacturers have come to the same conclusion but independently, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Not to mention that these projects aren't knocked up over a weekend. We know that most models take years to go from concept to delivery, and so by the time a second manufacturer announces their version of something, the first one has probably already sunk a lot of time and money into their model. And even if duplication looks like it's clogging up the market, the alternative might not necessarily have been something different. It might well have been nothing at all. If a manufacturer thinks Model A will sell well, and that's where they've invested their time and tooling, they're not just going to shift to some obscure prototype on a whim because someone else got there first. There's no magical backup model just sitting in the wings waiting to be called up. Admittedly, some manufacturers have tried to work around the duplication minefield. I feel like Rapido is a good example here. You know, they've carved out a nice little niche by focusing on more quirky or unusual prototypes. You know, things like the Jones Goods, the Porter Parr twins, the S160s, the Y7, the L-Class, that's the Manning Wardle. You know, these aren't your BR standards or big popular diesels. They're unique little locos that come in nice liveries and are fun to have. As a result, they do tend to be smaller production runs, meaning that Rapido can be a bit more agile as a result. And that does give them a bit of room to be bold, a little eccentric even, and still make it work commercially. Compare that with a manufacturer working with larger production volumes where the model has to be viable in lots of different liveries and be part of the range for several years to get the most out of it. It's not that one approach is better than the other, but it's different stakes and different risks, essentially. Also, sometimes duplication isn't even about doing something new. It's about updating something old. Technology and manufacturing techniques keep improving, and older models can start to look a bit tired after a while. The Terrier that I was talking about earlier is a great example here. So, a company might remake a model that already exists purely because they think they can do it better now. In some cases, that's totally justified, especially like the Terrier, when the old version was really showing its age. But that's not always the case. There are a few models I've reviewed where I've said, if you don't have this prototype already, then get the latest version. But if you've already got the previous version, it's not a massive upgrade. Something like the Bachmann 9F springs to mind here. The new Hornby version is great and I love it, but if I already owned a Bachmann model, I probably wouldn't be jumping to replace it immediately. Overall though, I think a lot of people feel that duplication spreads the hobby and enthusiasts too thin. With two manufacturers offering the same loco, you're splitting the audience, and that feels like it has to be bad for the hobby, right? Well, not necessarily, and I'm going to talk about that more in a moment, but I do understand the frustration. It's a messy issue, and maybe it's not quite as black and white as some people make it out to be. Now, just a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Readly. If you like reading railway magazines, but you can never choose which one to get, well, you can just get them all with a single subscription to Readly. They've got BRM, Railway Modeler, Model Rail, even Garden Rail if you're dreaming up some outdoor style layout ideas now that the weather's warming up a bit. They've also got access to the heritage magazines too, and you get access to over 8,000 magazines and newspapers, so there's genuinely something for everyone in there. Even if your interests go beyond trains. I mean, why would they? But, just in case. One of the things I really like is the access to back issues. It's super handy if you've seen a layout in the past that you want to revisit, or maybe you remember a tutorial from a few months back that you now want to put into practice. Well, it's all there for you to find on your phone. And once you do, you can bookmark it so you're not forever scrolling to try and remember what issue it was in. It's all really easy to use. It works on your phone or your tablet, like I said, and you can download issues to read offline too, which is great if you're on a long journey or if you're just ever in a situation where you don't have Wi-Fi or a great phone signal. Now, Readly are offering a 2-month free trial so you can give it a go yourself and see if you like it. I'll put a link down in the description where you can get access, and of course you can cancel anytime as well. So definitely check them out, and big thanks to Readly for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. So here's where I might lose a few people, because when it comes to duplication of models, I've got what some people might call an unpopular opinion. I don't actually think duplication is a bad thing, at least not for us as customers. Now, obviously it's not ideal for the manufacturers. This isn't just a hobby for them, it's their livelihood, their businesses. And for the retailers too, having to try and shift two versions of the same loco, often released within months of each other, well, sometimes with very similar specs and detail levels, it's not exactly easy. Especially when customers start playing comparison games in the comments before either model has been released. But for us, the modelers, the collectors, the people actually buying the things, I think there's a lot of upside. We're always talking about how prices are getting higher and how it's becoming harder to afford new models. In fact, I recently did a whole video on this subject. And while duplication won't magically fix that, it does introduce competition. And competition, more often than not, works in our favour. If two manufacturers are making the same locomotive, they both want your money. So they've got to offer something better, whether that's in terms of the actual price, features, accuracy, or just general overall value. And that's where things start to get interesting. Take the Bachmann Class 31, for example. It introduced their auto uncoupling system, which was a pretty clever little innovation, something new to help it stand out from the crowd. Now that's a feature that Bachmann brought to the table that Accurascale didn't have. Meanwhile, Accurascale are known for making phenomenal models at very competitive prices. So what did Bachmann do? well, they priced their 31 lower than their usual big ticket releases, more in line with what Accurascale were doing. You know, they learnt from their competition when it came to the Class 37 and kind of losing out a little bit on that, and so, you know, brought their price down for the 31 as a result. And we've also seen the same happen very recently with the same companies making Class 66s. You know, that's competition at work. That's manufacturers pushing each other forward. And of course, there have been instances in the past where mistakes happen. We've all seen it. A model comes out and the green isn't quite right, or there's a detail that doesn't match the prototype. You know, in a world with only one manufacturer doing that model, you're stuck with that version. But with duplication, you've got another option, a second interpretation, and it gives you the power to choose. And that's also a great way to communicate with the manufacturers, because they learn from this stuff. You know, if one version sells better because it's more affordable, or it has a particular feature, or they got something right, that sends a message. If one gets criticized for an error, that feedback gets noticed. And then the next time that company releases a model, they'll hopefully be more careful. It's not just about punishing the mistakes though, it's about raising the bar across the board. There are also practical benefits too. Say you're modelling a depot or a mainline scene that needs multiple Class 47s, for example, in BR Blue, let's say. Instead of having to repaint or renumber everything yourself, you can now mix and match between, say, the Hellion and the Bachmann models to get different running numbers, or even different subclasses and tooling variations. You know, that kind of flexibility wouldn't exist without duplication. And in some instances, we see models at different price points. To take the Class 66 again, while the Bachmann and Accurascale models are fighting at the top end of the scale, we also have the Hornby Railroad version, which is considerably cheaper. You know, that's great for those who aren't keen on high prices and aren't so fussed about the high level of detail either. At the end of the day, more choice is a good thing, and you're not stuck with a single take on a model. You can pick the one that suits you. You know, whether that's based on budget, detailing, running quality, or just brand loyalty. Although I will say we do need to be a little bit careful with that last one. And as I said earlier on, getting too tribal, you know, only supporting one brand no matter what, that can sometimes cloud the bigger picture. It's great to support your favourites, but we should still be open-minded enough to recognise when another company has done a really solid job too. I've seen in the past when Company X announces a new model, you know, there's lots of people who seem to take glee in the comments and saying, oh, I'm not cancelling my pre-order with Company Y for this. Or even the complete reverse of that, this will be miles better than what Company Z is making. I get it to a certain extent, but remember that you're comparing products that haven't even been released yet. So keep an open mind, that's all I'm saying. So yeah, duplication might not be ideal for the people making and selling the models, but from where I'm sitting as a modeler, it's not all bad news. In fact, it might just be one of the things that helps drive the hobby forward. So yeah, duplication in the hobby. It's not all bad. I do completely understand why it frustrates some people, especially when it feels like we see the same types of locos pop up again and again, while others still haven't been touched. But I think, like a lot of things in this hobby, it's worth trying to take things with a bit more of a positive outlook. You know, at the end of the day, it's actually a good sign that manufacturers are able to release competing models. For years, we've heard people say the hobby is dying, or that, you know, certain manufacturers won't last much longer. But if you step back and look at what's happening, we've got more manufacturers now than ever before, and they're producing some of the best quality models that we've ever seen. And sure, more manufacturers means that there's going to be more overlap, but it also means that the hobby is healthy enough to support them, and that's something to be genuinely optimistic about. There's enough demand out there, enough variety in taste that these companies can exist and even cater more directly to what we as modelers are interested in. So maybe next time you see two companies both working on the same prototype, don't see it as a bad thing. See it as a sign that the hobby is alive and kicking and competitive, and that's something that we can all benefit from. But hey, that's just my take. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. I always enjoy hearing your thoughts and chatting about this kind of stuff. And if you've got any ideas for topics that you'd like me to cover in the future, well, stick those down in the comments as well. Please don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, because it really does help out the channel. But that is going to be it for today. So thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.